Welcome our friends for the second session of our conference this year. Today we are going to focus on the issue of power in Africa, or rather the lack of it. It is a scandal that we have some 600 million people in Africa without power, none. They have no life. How can we talk about development if half the people don't have access to power? How can you have life? How you can have education? How you can health? How do you live without power? For that, we had a wonderful group of friends here, our panel, which is diverse. It will look at the issue from different angle. But before we do this, I would like to welcome the president of the World Bank, David Malpass, who will be addressing us. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for inviting me to speak at the 2022 Governance Forum hosted by Ibrahim Foundation. The world is facing a dangerous period of overlapping crises: the COVID-19 pandemic, inflation, debt, and Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Africa is particularly vulnerable to the impacts of the overlapping crises. Vaccination rates in sub-Saharan Africa are at around 14%, as opposed to 57% globally. Many African countries are facing elevated debt levels and large debt service costs, and are already at high risk of debt distress. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has decreased the supply of grains to many African countries and increased the price of fertilizer. This worsens food insecurity and increases social tensions. The recent crises come on top of the dramatic impacts of climate change that have been felt across the African continent for some time. In Ethiopia, South Sudan, and Madagascar, there were no rains for the past 3 years. In the Horn of Africa alone, 25 million people are facing the risk of famine. The impact of drought on medium-term growth is about 8 times higher in Africa than in other regions. Climate change could force up to 86 million Africans to migrate within their own countries by 2050. Climate interventions and projects offer large global public goods benefits, but many require substantial external funding as well as a comprehensive policy framework. The challenge is how to incentivize these activities. The World Bank has recently published a short note that lays out some of our ideas on this, and I encourage you to review it and give feedback. Supporting countries as they adapt to climate change is a key part of our climate change action plan. We're committed to having a minimum of 50% of our climate finance be in adaptation, and many of our activities in Africa are geared toward building resilience and adapting to climate change. In 2021, at the One Planet Summit, we committed $5.6 billion to support the Great Green Wall Initiative to improve natural resource management and help local communities generate income in the 11 countries that stretch from Mauritania to Djibouti. We've already implemented projects totaling over $4 billion. In Burkina Faso, Chad, Mali, Mauritania, Niger, and Senegal, more than 2 million people have benefited from the Regional Sahel Pastoralism Support Project, which is being scaled up to enhance the adaptation strategies of pastoralists threatened by drought and conflict. We're finalizing our new core diagnostic Country Climate and Development Reports, or CCDRs, for the G5 Sahel countries plus Ghana and Cameroon. More CCDR reports will be coming on stream next year. This work will help countries prioritize their climate adaptation and mitigation actions to focus on achieving scale and impact in their interventions. I'd like to emphasize the importance of strong governance and sound institutions to confronting climate challenges in Africa, the area which is at the core of the Mo Ibrahim Foundation's work. To help, the global community will need to set the right governance and incentive structure for the energy's transition. There are several big challenges on this front. For example, a country that wants to decommission a coal-fired power plant faces a trade-off between accounting for those reductions either as part of its NDCs or selling those reductions as carbon credits to finance the closure. The need to finance the global public good conflicts with the process of setting ambitious targets. This is just one of the major challenges in financing global public goods. Governments also need to enhance the efficiency, openness, and accountability of institutions in key sectors like agriculture, energy, water, and forestry. Under IDA 20, governance and institutions remains a key cross-cutting issue. It seeks to foster more inclusive governance by strengthening social accountability and citizen engagement. The Ibrahim Index of African Governance is vital in understanding the overall trajectory of governance in Africa and informing decision-making processes, including in response to climate change. We are now just 6 months away from COP27 in Egypt, which has been dubbed Africa's COP. Leading up to this COP, we must remember that building a more climate-resilient Africa does not mean slowing down development or the progress toward achieving SDG 7. On the contrary, climate action can stimulate growth and improve human health and well-being. Investment in resilient infrastructure also has great potential to deliver urban and rural development in power, sanitation, water, and safe transport. Let me conclude with this observation. The depth of the ongoing crises makes clear that Africa needs much more clean energy. Natural gas will be an important transition fuel to reduce carbon intensity. New investment in hydro and dam maintenance are important. Scaling up energy efficiency, including air conditioning, and making the grid investments needed to absorb renewables will also be key steps. These various steps will be essential in Africa's transition from subsistence farming to productive economic activity in agriculture, services, industry, and public sectors. They are also a key building block for security and broad-based improvements in growth and living standards. Thank you, and I wish you all a very productive forum.
Really, we thank David for his contribution. Obviously, he's in Davos, which is happy to be running at the same time as our conference here. But I think that was a useful input from the President of the World Bank and an awareness of the issues in Africa and what's their take. Of course, feel free during the discussion to comment on or if you want to criticize or applaud whatever actions by the World Bank, please feel free. But let me, before that, I introduce the panel. And maybe in Africa we respect age, so I'm going to start with people age-wise. Chris Gentle is really an expert in energy. He was work with the World Energy Council, which is a vast organization, 100 years old, I think, the World Energy Council, about 100 years old. Yeah. And before that, he was a partner with Deloitte and was KPMG and WPP, European Commission. And were you in the European Commission on behalf of UK or?
No, we were working on regional development and
Okay.
and infrastructure projects like energy.
Okay, thank you. So Chris, welcome and thank you for joining us. And I have Mamadou Falkani. Mamadou Falkani from Senegal. He is the energy advisor of President Macky Sall, who is now the chair of the African Union. And I think probably you watched my interview with Macky Sall last night, which is quite ranging and quite robust. So you are the man who's giving him all this stuff, you know. Okay. And he has a distinguished career. He went to the elite schools in France, etc., from the Polytechnique. Or did you go to the Polytechnique? Yeah. Okay. If you stayed in France, you would have been a minister now. Yeah, anyway.
I have one friend from school in the government.
I also wish to welcome Sidi Wal Taha, the Director General of the Arab Bank for Economic Development. I can see you on the screen. Can you see and hear us here?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much.
Welcome. Just one question before we start. Is CD a title or your first name?
It's my first name.
Okay. You know what CD means in Arabic? Yeah?
No, my master.
My master, yes. That's a nice way to call yourself. You should say thank you to your parents. Anyway, he's another distinguished academic. He's an economist. He was a minister in Mauritania before, and he's now running the Arab Bank for Economic Development. Thank you for joining us, Sidi.
Thank you very much.
We agreed here to use first names. The foundation always use first name, so no offense. And beside our three distinguished guests, we have two wonderful young people who come from our network, what we call it the Now Generation Network, the large group of African. Actually, many of them are sitting here. Almost everybody sitting here from that group. At least people who managed to get a visa. It became so difficult. Actually, I was not supposed to moderate this session. We had a journalist from Kenya, somebody works for BBC, worked for various distinguished organizations, and has been struggling to get a visa. We booked him the hotel, we had his tickets. We told the British government he's going back in 48 hours. No, he was not going to ask for asylum or anything, but still didn't give him the visa. And that's one of the problems. And I don't know how in Britain here we talk about global Britain, how Britain is going to be global if you cannot even have a conference in London. It's really unfortunate. We have Gerald from Zimbabwe. You are an entrepreneur and you founded two companies, actually. One, Educate, focus on education process and how to improve that. And one was Future Africa Investment. So you're making a lot of money, I guess.
No, not a lot of money.
So we look for you forward to create some scholarships and to create your own foundation,
With
I
time.
hope. Okay, well done.
Thank you.
Anne Nyambani, correct? Pronouncing the name correctly, I hope. She is from Uganda. She is an energy expert working with FAO, the Food and Agriculture. So that's very interesting because both food and energy are our main issues today in Africa. So still somebody works really in the nexus of the two issues. Right, let us start the session, and we're gonna have a free flow of discussion. Please, people jump in, and we'd like to benefit really from your view. Chris, let me start with you. You have been in this energy sector almost 35 years, I guess, or something like that. When you look at Africa, what is the road forward for us? We have a continent now which is half of the people don't have power, difficult to access finance to do gas or fossil or anything in Africa. Then we talk about development. How can we develop this continent? And then, people say we need some power. Well, but you have to have green energy. You cannot do that. Yes, we love solar, but it cannot be a solution for every problem. And if you give you a clean sheet and a pen, what do you suggest a way forward for Africa?
Well, thank you for the question. It's the elephant in the room, as we say in this session. I think that one of the things that you do actually in terms of actually the institutional structures is one of the most important things. Working both with the council and also from an individual perspective, I've worked a lot with investors around energy infrastructure projects across the continent, and one of the big challenges is basically the kind of the institutional representation and governance, which sometimes doesn't make the mark for international investors. And so when you put a project together, whether it be kind of onshore wind or solar, that quite often the things that are not there are in terms of the institutions in order to manage that, to connect it to the grid, to maintain the grid. So I think that, often we kind of say, well, it's an energy kind of issue, but I think actually that, actually it's a governance and institutional issue within Africa about actually providing those frameworks. It gives more confidence to investors and allows that process to start. So I think that the one thing that I would say, and it's an absolute outrage, I would say, and it's really good that COP is in Africa this year, is how do we kind of solve this problem with 600 million people without access to electricity? Because the 21st century is the electric century, and we need to make that happen within Africa as well. So I think, but putting the institutions in place, and the final thing I would add would be basically in terms of skills and diversity. So ladies like Anne get involved with actually kind of building energy expertise in the continent that allows things like grids and distribution of particularly of electricity to happen, because we build a skills network which is there. And I think so certainly from one of our big things is how do we make sure we've got the skills that sit within the continent, not only just to establish but also build and maintain and make sure that there is power that's on 99% of the time.
So that's interesting. One point maybe not many of us thought of it. You feel there is a lack of also trained people to take care of all this infrastructure which need to put in place.
Yeah.
And that's something maybe we don't think of or say, let us just put a factory here, but how we're gonna? Yeah. Okay.
So I've seen that. I mean, I've worked with even startups that are basically trying to put solar into rural communities. So you have mini grids, and they're there. But two big challenges really. One is distribution. So getting that to the end users, to farmers and small businesses, households, schools. But the second crucial thing is, when something goes wrong, how do we kind of fix it quickly?
Yeah.
And when we're generating excess electricity, how do we get that into a grid? Or do we have a battery or things like that? So those are some of the really practical kind of things that we kind of face in order actually to kind of make and start to build the energy system. But I would 100% agree with you that we can't have development within Africa and raise prosperity without having energy. The two actually have to go absolutely hand in hand.
Absolutely. I think it's very important. Mamadou, you are a country now who I understand discovered a lot of gas.
Yes.
And you need to develop this gas.
Yes.
How much trouble have you had in raising funds, getting operators to get this gas out, etc.? Do you have especially when last year there was talk about stopping investment in gas, which was a blunt statement. Is that affecting you? How are you going to get your gas out?
Oh, well, thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here joining you. For the example of Senegal, we had the main discoveries between 2014 and 2017. We had 15 trillion of cubic feet gas discovery.
Please speak up a little bit.
Yeah, we have 15 trillion cubic feet gas that we discovered in the maritime border with the Mauritania that will go into production end of next year. And we have a large gas field we discovered within Senegalese water, 32 trillion cubic feet, which is a huge gas field. At that time, it was very challenging because it was the deeper gas field discovered in the world, in Africa.
Yeah.
So it was more a technological challenge to take out the gas and also find a very cheap concept of development in a very competitive market, especially the first phase of trend of gas, which will be 2.5 million ton per annum, is aimed to supply the Asian market. At that time, the domestic market did not allow the investment because our market is very small and we don't have an important infrastructure within the region to address that market. So one of the main issues in Africa is to find a domestic market within Africa. That's why those big investment, $5 billion, is investment for gas exportation. So last year at Glasgow, so we had that mainstream talk about ending the financing of gas fields. So that will make me say that the industrialized countries does not have the moral authority on issues related to climate change. Because they are 100% responsible on this global warming, and the South is paying the high price and suffer the most of the consequences when they need basic access to energy. And we cannot consider African citizens as second-class citizens because we, as policymakers, we need to guarantee them access to
European Union said that their members, of course, are free to use gas as a transition.
Okay.
So are you saying to you, no, you?
Now the rhetoric is changing in the light of the war in Ukraine. So, I mean, the resource of gas we have in Africa is very important for us and for the rest of the world to commit in the energy transition. We say yes to the energy transition because we're already there. If you take the example of Senegal, 32% of our electricity production is renewable. You take countries
how much?
like
20?
32.
32%.
So
That's
we are
excellent.
already in the mix
yes.
of energy. So now, last weekend, Olaf Scholz was in Senegal. So it's not every day that a new elected German chancellor made an African tour because they are desperately seeking for gas. But if they want that gas, they need to pledge to finance.
It is really
gas.
ridiculous. I mean, we had a huge argument with our friends in Europe about that decision in Glasgow to stop funding. And we said, how do you do that? I mean, you are just funding. I mean, the Deputy Prime Minister of Belgium said, oh, we had a cabinet yesterday and we approved funding for a new gas-fired station. Yeah. So it's okay. So why you guys say, oh, we don't know. So who is doing that? And I mean, it's not me, but you guys signed this.
Yes, that's true.
And Germany closed down their nuclear power stations, and then they put 3 major stations coal-fired in Germany. And we say, you guys, is that very smart? What is that? And what some of these decisions are really silly, and clearly they're retreating from that. I mean, because it's morally indefensible.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that the global context is very important at the moment. And one of the things at the Energy Council we have is basically we have what we call the Energy Trilemma. It's got 3 poles on it. One is net zero, which is obviously absolutely critical. The second is energy security. And the third is energy access. So that means basically, do we have clean and affordable energy for people to access at a reasonable price?
Yeah.
And when we were in Glasgow last year, that triangle was to some extent destabilized by almost too much talk about net zero and not enough talk about access and security. And the invasion by Russia in terms of into Ukraine has taken that triangle, and now all of a sudden energy security now is the big thing, which has destabilized the other areas. It has destabilized not only for Europe, but everywhere else. And as you mentioned about the German Chancellor's visit, that is driven by energy security. Okay, in a way, Europe comes first.
Yeah,
okay?
of course.
You come second. I don't admit, but this is causing
that is the world we live in.
Huge imbalance, And the reason I mention that is that without having those 3 poles in balance, both in the world but also within Africa, right, we can't get to an energy transition that's going to work for everyone, and that's where we need to get to. So I mean, we were talking a little bit before over lunch that we have to basically balance that triangle now in the world. And then this will allow a basis for us to kind of move forward at COP27 in order to move things forward in Africa. And I think that's really, really important.
Yeah.
Without that balance, we can't kind of move forward.
Yeah, but we always remind our friends in Europe about what they claim to be the core value of European Union.
Absolutely.
And we say, where are your core values in what you're doing here?
Yeah.
So that's really an issue. I think we also need now to engage our young generation to see how we see the situation from an angle as a young entrepreneur working in Zimbabwe, correct? Your company is mainly in Zimbabwe, or you're working
in Kenya.
You are able to work in Zimbabwe.
Yes.
Okay.
But I'm based in Kenya and also operating a company in Kenya there.
Okay. You have not been arrested yet.
No.
Right.
It's all legal.
Right. You, young, active African who's trying to build up business and looking around you, what is the picture from you? I mean, what stops us having power? Is it politicians not interested in this? They have other issues, or they don't understand actually what is needed? What is your view as representative of young generation?
Thank you very much, Mo. So I think, for the most part, it's there isn't a connecting point, between the younger generation and the older generation. We belong to 2 different worlds, right? Our needs are different. We are in a technological sort of era where we rely on power for a lot of what it is that we want to do. We are looking to leave most of the countries where we come from because of, just the lack of a basic need such as power, and go where there's access. So I think the challenge there is, for the most part, the government is also trying to solve some of these challenges on their own. They are not harnessing the talent that is actually within the continent itself. You'll find most countries are very successful because, especially in the global north, because they invest in young people, they invest in the innovation. So, I think Chris was speaking about, was it Chris or someone I was speaking to earlier, just about, thinking through access to power and the value chain that's involved in that. Kenya is a fairly exciting place. because it allows, such ingenuity to thrive. Whether it's small things like last mile delivery of gas. I get that, for example, in Kenya, but I don't get that when I'm in Zimbabwe, right? That's because the environment allows for young people to identify where the challenges are, as well as come up with solutions for some of those challenges. So there's an environment that, it's not just this is what we want, but we also have something to contribute towards the conversation. How are most governments actually engaging young people on the issue of, this energy issue? Before you go to COP27, we haven't seen any conversations taking place at that level, right?
So we have one now.
We have one now, fortunately.
Okay.
And it's a great platform. But there are also young people who are not just from a technological perspective involved. We have young, brilliant, policymakers who have great experience, they have great ideas, and they can actually contribute, in great ways, right? We have young finance professionals, who can help governments think about these things, build the business case, and structure things accordingly. And I think we're not tapping into that. And that's where the challenge is. And I feel if we can make that connect, then we might definitely see a lot of traction.
How can make that connection?
So I think it honestly begins with engagement, right? If you look at Africa as a continent, it's a very young continent. So you have a lot of, and we've heard this time and time again, an older generation that's making decisions for a younger generation, and they're not part of the conversation. So it requires a lot of intentionality. You see traction in countries like Senegal. I was there a few weeks ago. I had the opportunity to meet with, Amadou Hart, the Minister of Economic Planning. He's fairly young. He's got a young team around him. He's pulled the best brains from all over the world who are Senegalese, and they've said, we want to go back home and contribute towards this. So it really just requires that intentionality by leaders, in particular countries to say, hey, listen, we've got great assets out there. And the biggest asset in any country is not the renewable energy or this, it's actually your people. Yeah. So how are you converting that energy and that talent, and coming up with great ideas that will essentially move us in the right direction?
But Gerald, I always say to our young people that yes, you guys complain a lot about nobody sharing with you the power or asking you questions. When you are the largest community, and I always say you can have the biggest political party in the country by the sheer number of your population. Why did you guys grab power? Why are you waiting for people to take and give, to hand it to you? Yeah. Or at least go and vote.
Yeah.
Okay, because I'm so surprised about young people who don't bother to go and vote, and then they go out to demonstrate against what, okay, you go out and vote. Okay. So I will always encourage young people, get involved in the political process, choose the right leaders, get yourself a young leader. It's instead of all these guys at 80 years and 90 years old who have no clue what this world is about. I mean, So, okay, you're going to stand for election sometime?
Maybe not.
No?
So I think that's a great question, Mo. And I think there's different sides to the coin. First of all, I think it's the options, right? There are not a lot of young people, inspiring young people, I guess, for the most part in certain countries who are rising up and saying, hey, I want to do this. And that obviously then brings about apathy amongst young people. They're like, the options we have are not exciting. There's also fear of, getting into the space. We might have the numbers, but we don't have the guns. So you see it in particular countries where young and upcoming politicians, pay a significant price to get to the top. So the question is, are most young people willing to pay that price? Yes, there are some who are. From a voting perspective, I think it's a very complicated situation as well. We never know what the actual numbers are in some of the countries. So we encounter some of those challenges. But But young people are actually rising up significantly. They're using social media as platforms to engage.
Very powerful tools.
Very powerful tools. So I think with time,
that's much easier for you to organize.
Yes.
We really need this young generation to organize and really change the continent, because old generation failed, obviously. And you are the youngest, so they're coming to you. This is an African tradition. It's not sexist.
Okay.
Just because you are younger.
Okay.
Yeah. You work for FAO, but also you specialize in energy.
Yes.
And that is really where the two problems meet.
Yes.
Food and power. Your work also brings you close to farmers and their needs, and one question we raised yesterday and were astonished about is the lack. Nobody talks about clean cooking in Africa. When we estimate there is a very large number of deaths because of this, cooking using biomass and wood stuff, the coal, and 3/4 of African households really use unclean cooking methods. 3/4. African women do the cooking. So African women are really bearing the brunt of this. People estimate few millions every year die because of disease arising from that unhealthy approach. How are we going to change that? How are we going to change? Because it's unacceptable. And the problem is, I'm sorry to say that, but if 500 die in Ukraine, that's covering every few million women die of diseases. Nobody hear about it. Nobody even know about it.
Yeah.
The value of human life is not the same everywhere. Tell us a little bit about that. How we deal with this? We need to raise that issue. We need the world to know, look, women are dying because we don't have, method to clean it. Those guys need gas, need something better than this.
Yeah.
Okay, what do you say?
Yeah, I think I would start from it from a very different angle. Is if you look at.
Can you speak up, please, because I have bad hearing.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm too old. That's a problem.
Okay. No, I'm saying that I would start looking at clean issues to do with clean cooking from a very different perspective. First of all, I think most of the interventions that are being implemented in African countries, it's like an imposition. Somebody comes into your house and they tell you, you know what, whatever you're using right now is not okay, you need to switch to something else, which is not the right way to do things. Do you first understand why I'm using a particular fuel? The reason right now I'm based in Uganda, but I'm Kenyan. There's a reason why a Ugandan woman would cook matoke on a charcoal stove, on a firewood stove, and not use LPG. But most of the time we go and say this is primitive, this is dirty, this is unclean and all that. And then you're like, you know what, switch to this one. It's like you're not even appreciating my hospitality. I've hosted you. This is what I prefer using. So we really need to, first of all, try to understand the socio-cultural dynamics at a household level so that by the time we try to suggest something else, it goes beyond the issue to do with affordability. It needs to be tackled we need to look at it in terms of the health aspect. We really need to make these women understand that it's very unproductive for a woman who is somebody who's very productive to actually spend 3 hours, 4 hours in a day to just go fetch firewood that he can use just for a day, and then she has to do the same thing over and over again. Yet he can use his time to do other things. So these are the kind of ways that we need to approach it. It's not about you coming, giving me some fancy stove that I can't even cook for my 10 children to actually use. And that is where the rubber meets the road. It's about that imposition that is not working. We feel like you are just taking my hospitality for granted. You're coming to change things that I'm used to be doing for all that time. So these are the things that we really need to look at the moment when it comes to clean cooking and just understanding the kind of dynamics. And I always give this example of my mother. As an energy expert, I was looking at clean cooking, and then I'm like, you know what? My mom was using firewood for cooking, and I was like, I do not want my mom to die. I do not want, when I send my children to see their grandmother, I'm like, oh my goodness, they are going to breathe that smoke, and then they'll have respiratory diseases. So what did I do? I got a good job. I went and bought him some nice cooker. I think it was around 500 USD, that's a lot of money. And the next time I went to the village, my mother had it was a souvenir. He does not want to get it dirty. It was there. And my mom is an educated person. It's not like she is a teacher. And I'm like, Mom, what happened? He's like, no, you know the kind of house that I'm living in, I cannot imagine putting this nice fancy, because this is an urban thing. You young people, you're bringing us things that we don't even understand. I had to build my mom a new house so that she can actually start using the cooker. You see, because the gratat one was not working. So, but for me, I was
a good daughter.
Yes, I was addressing an issue of I do not want her to die. So I had to step back and understand that it goes beyond the smoke. It goes beyond, there is a structure. There is a structure that needs to be put in place for this thing to work. So unless we understand that, we are going to be talking about that. Every time you look at clean cooking, you go back, you're like, oh, last year we were at 40%. The next time we are 25. You're like, what's happening? We are not making any progress. It's because we are imposing things on people. So we really need to understand those backgrounds for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's a very moving statement. Thank you. Sidi, now you heard all this, and we need to sort out this issue of power in Africa. You are the banker. You and your friend need to write some big checks there. What's your take on all this? What is the role of private sector, government? We need to finance. It's not just building power stations. We need to have grid, and maybe the grids need to be upgraded to intelligent grids if we're going to accommodate all other sources and renewable and etc. What is your take on that? What you bankers, especially you are focusing in Africa, what do you think the role you and the private sector and the government should play in really sorting out this massive problem in Africa?
Thank you very much for this question. I do believe that one should realize that Africa is a continent, but it's not one country. So we have a great diversity among African countries. So the problem of access to energy and the problem of the energetic transition is different from a country like South Africa to a country like Niger. All the issues are globally the same, but the problems are quite different. In South Africa, the coal issue is there, so the need for developing renewable energy is very important, but the infrastructure is already very well developed. While in Niger, for instance, we have a scattered country in a very large territory in most of the population are in the desert, so it will be very difficult to have a grid. So the government has to work on standalone power station. And you can imagine the challenge the government may face and the private sector, because if you want to involve the private sector, the project should be profitable. If the project is not profitable, the private sector will not be there. So if you have to develop solar power plant in Zinder, for instance, in Niger, so that the cost of that power station will be really will make the energy not affordable for the population. So we have to take into consideration the diversity in Africa. And also, if we look at in some countries, the large territory make it very difficult to develop a grid. But in some other countries, like Benin, for instance, it's very easy or Togo, it's very easy to have a national grid. And that will reduce substantially the cost for the investor. We should also recognize that some countries have reached a high level of access to electricity. For instance, in Morocco, it's above 90%. But I agree that in the Sahel region, for instance, in some countries, it are less than 20%. So there is a huge diversity in the situation, and it cannot be tackled the same way. So, for instance, if we look at DRC is a country endowed with a lot of natural resources. Not only they are contributing to the reduction of the emissions because of the Congo forest, but also more than 90% of electricity produced in DRC comes from hydropower. This is a special situation, and I should also talk a little bit about a new project which Badia and other financiers are working on in DRC, is to develop electrical cars in Africa, and to develop batteries, electrical batteries between DRC and Zambia. Both countries have huge natural resources, which are very useful to produce electrical batteries. And we funded a feasibility study which was carried out by Bloomberg, and it shows that the cost of producing electrical batteries in DRC and Zambia is 1/3 of the cost for producing, for instance, in China. So this is the diversity we have in Africa and the diversity situation. Of course, the solution cannot come from development bank alone, but also cannot come from government. We should work together, not only with the private sector, but also with the civil society. And I really appreciate the cultural aspect raised by the young lady here with us. So we have also to take into consideration the cultural aspect, because sometimes it's not about the affordability or about the access, but it's about culture. So it's very important that we take into consideration the cultural aspect in Africa, which is very, very important. And of course, all the stakeholders should sit around the same table and discuss and agree on an acceptable framework for Africa. But as mentioned by the advisor to the President of Senegal, I do believe that the gas could be the energy of transition for not only for Africa, but for all countries around the world. But Africa has a chance to have large reserves of gas. And this can be also something, it can be a win-win partnership with Europe, because with what is going on in Ukraine, so it's really very useful for European countries to support Africa to develop its gas resources. Most countries today most of African countries has a huge deposit of gas, but they are not able to develop them because of the need of capital. So European countries can put into place a mechanism which will help African countries to raise funds from capital markets to develop the gas fields. For instance, in Senegal, in Mauritania, they have a common field, but they have also, each country has its own reserves, and this can be developed to cater for the need of Europe, but also for other countries around the world.
Thank you, Sidi, and I'm going to take some questions from the audience now to be part of this conversation. But you mentioned the DRC and the hydropower, and I always thought that was a great example of how we Africans sometimes shoot ourselves in the foot. I think I was a baby, I hear about Inga project. I'm a very old man now, I lost all my hair. And still, where is the Inga project? I mean, such a failure in execution, where we had resources to really power, not only the RC, some of its neighbors as well. And this is one problem we have to accept. Yes, of course, we blame Europe every now and then when they do something stupid, but we also do stupid stuff. And we really need to get our act together because it's just unacceptable. How we can miss out on a source of cheap and clean power like that.
I couldn't agree more. Inga can provide at least more than 40 gigawatt. But it's not only DRC. If you look at Guinea-Conakry, Guinea-Conakry has a huge potential in terms of hydropower.
Yeah.
But for reasons related to the political and the security circumstances and the governance, that was not be tapped.
It's unfortunately, we shoot ourselves in the foot. The Ethiopian trying to build a dam for it, which is great, but they're unable to have a conversation with their neighbors. And then we end up with a big problem between Sudan, Egypt, and Ethiopia, and a lot of unpleasant conversation when something just people need to sort it out and sort it out, because that can provide power for also not only Ethiopia, but for the region as well. But unfortunately, something is wrong sometimes with us Africans, and we need to face that.
Yes, but also we have to mention the case of the Sahel, for instance. Sahel has a huge potential for solar energy, but most of the areas are also subject to terrorist attacks. So that's also it's a very important link between security and development. So the potential is there, but it cannot be tapped because of the security issue.
Right. We invite the audience here, which is mainly the audience today is really the young people of the Now Generation Forum and people who graduated from various scholarships we have around here. But I must warn you, those guys are troublemakers. There are going to be some tough questions. Please don't talk offense. Who wants to start? Okay, I'll have the lady in the back. Oh, you. Okay, God help us. Okay.
Hi, my name is Natasha. I want to address two things. One, when we speak of clean cooking, we often tend to only address women, as if this is only a female problem, just because women are the ones who cook. And the challenge of doing that is that it becomes another crisis of when we talk about gender in politics. It's that we only tell women, why are you not voting for female politicians? As if their vote is going to determine who is elected. And I think it's not a gender issue, it's a humanity issue. And it's a conversation that should involve everybody. Men should know that their lives are also going to be significantly improved if they also switch to, or encourage their wives to switch to clean cooking. That's one part. The second part is, I think it can be condescending to tell young people that if you want to change power, vote. As if we are living in utopia where, you know, when you vote, your vote counts. Half the time, the decision has already been made. So you just wake up one morning, and it's a global problem where young people feel very resigned. Because what's the point of voting if a decision has already been made? Okay. That's one. And the last one,
that's number two.
Number two.
That's enough. Okay, let's give people other. Please sit down. Let me other. Right. Let us take the number one. When we say women, we're bringing the issue of the clean cooking to really the table because people don't appreciate it. The fact is that most of the victims or all of the victims are women. This is the fact. That's why the word the woman came here. Not because we say women should be cooking. Okay, I'm just identifying which sector of society is being hurt by that. So I'm a great supporter of women. That's why I'm trying to defend their rights to have clean cooking. Okay, so it is not meant as a sexist or such a thing. Concerning the vote and look, we have a number. Not all African countries are really corrupt or dismal. We have African countries which have decent voting systems. We have quite a few, actually, countries. And in these countries, you go and vote. In countries which you cannot vote or your vote will not be counted, you need to protest. And there are various ways of protesting. Yeah? You look at what young people are doing in Khartoum. Yeah? So, revolt. Revolt. You want to be free? Revolt. Okay? Don't accept to be a slave. You have to revolt. Is that fair? Okay. Yes, you after, yeah? Please, everybody mention your name or what you're doing. Okay, you speak after her, okay, so yeah. Otherwise, we'll be accused that we are suppressing women, which I do not dare, yeah.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mandeepa, and I am an alumna scholar of the Mo Ibrahim Foundation, and I'm currently a researcher at Leiden University. I have 2 points. I really do have 2 points. And they're mostly directed at Chris. So my first question, Chris, is what would you say is an acceptable trade-off between institutional structures in Africa that still rely on fossil fuels for jobs and revenue at this current point? And secondly, you also speak of skills and the need for the amplification of skills on the continent. And the amplification of human capacity development rests on jobs. I think we can all agree on this, whether it trickles down into education and so forth. And many of which still come from fossil fuel-driven industries, for instance, like in Nigeria. On a sustainability front, Gerald spoke about the value chain, and I'd like to push this a little bit further, looking at a long-term geopolitical and economic question. So let's say Africa finds itself in a position with the right conditions to develop and to develop in a green way. Is the world willing and ready to give Africa the agency to close the cycle of production for ourselves, to allow a cheaper way of developing, to allow a more inclusive way of developing, and to allow a sustainable way of development? Thank you.
Right. A lot of questions again. Who would like to answer the first question, please? Who want to answer the first one?
Take the last one if you want.
Maybe you take the second one because you talked about the education and training.
So, I mean,
go ahead, yeah.
Would you
Yeah,
like me-
go ahead, go, yeah.
Okay, sorry. It's a very good question that you've asked, and a very difficult one to answer. So I think there are a couple of things I would say. I mean, one, it would be naive to think that basically that we can get development in Africa without having no hydrocarbons at all. Okay? But at the same time, where we can have carbon capture as much as possible, you know, I mean, Africa can't replicate what's happened in Europe and the West and in other places, because it's, you know, it would be an economic disaster. So, and the funds need to be given in order to prevent that. Okay, but actually thinking that, you know, we're going to have planes flying or cars driving that aren't going to use hydrocarbons straight away would be a little bit crazy. And also in terms of the gas for cooking and things like that, those things will happen. But actually, you know, can we capture as much of that carbon as possible? I think the second thing I would say, if we're thinking, to a degree, you might argue this is idealistic, but is that what the ideal thing would be, in my view, in Africa is a demand-driven energy transition. And what I mean by that is basically that we need to give people the tools in order to make the decisions. I think both the people on either side of me spoke so well about what young people are doing. And that is about what, at the council we call it humanizing energy. Right? And what we mean by that is basically things around, you know, having energy literacy. You know, so the world took 200 years to get from 10% to 90% literacy in terms of reading and writing. Our estimate is that basically the world is less than 10% literate in energy. And what I mean by that is, do we understand where energy comes from when we make choices about energy, about what the implications of using that energy are? And so what we need to do is try and do that. And one of the things we're doing at the council in order to enable that is we have a partnership with the BBC worldwide. So if you want to go and look at something, we produce films that are made by people on the ground about what their energy stories are. And so, you know, in order to actually provide some of the kind of enthusiasm that these guys talked about here, is actually how can you capture your energy story? So it would be great actually to do one about your mom actually and her experiences. It would be fantastic.
You're going to be a TV star now.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm going to talk to the BBC about doing that. So you could be a star. but that we can basically make that much more demand driven, which our people are getting more in charge, not just in the political sense, as you say, Mo, but also in the energy sense about basically what kind of environment, what kind of energy would I like to use, and that demand pull that basically then says, okay, well, I don't want to just follow a kind of, let's go with coal, then oil, then gas, then renewables, okay? No, we can leapfrog a lot of those stages and actually get into a much more clean power, but driven by people would be the ideal thing. And so giving people literacy and the ability to do that, I think is an important part of that energy transition.
Thank you. I think you waiting a long time to speak.
Yeah, thank you so much. My name is Fabrice Muchiga.
Can I suggest one question only from now on?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, because the number of people want to ask. Yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you. Fabrice Muchiga from DRC and from the Now Generation Network. And I see another elephant in the room that has not been identified apparently. And it's really the structural violence of this energy transition. Because when we speak about, for example, the case of DRC, we hear the idea of electric vehicles, as they mentioned here. We hear the potential of the resources like hydroelectricity. It's too much. We hear as well the Congo Basin, you know, and then this elephant that is forgotten, which is the violence and conflict that has been there for 3 decades over natural resources. So I'm from the Eastern Congo, and I know how these resources has led to conflict. And I was looking forward to hear how can we, or how might we ensure that this energy transition happened without exacerbating the violence and the conflict. And that's why I really mentioned this elephant of structural violence. When we push for more resources, for more cobalt, this is artisanal miners who are dying to get this cobalt. This is children who are pushed actually out of school to go and dig for this cobalt. And I think we should address this elephant in the room as well, the one of violence and conflict.
Okay.
Thank you.
I can add
Go ahead.
Thank you very much for raising that question, because it's the dark side of the new drivers of energy. Exactly. At the same time, they are pushing Africa to go to those renewable, but at the same time, they don't really assess the ecological disaster it caused to the country like Congo. You are right that the fact, I was reading a paper where it was mentioned that the percentage of cobalt found in the urine of young people who are working in the mines are like 43 times higher than, you know, a normal figures, and this create a health toll issue. So that dark side of the new energy need to be addressed, and we need to strike the right balance, like you mentioned it in your report. It's very important.
But I mean, you wonder when we link resources with violence, and why a country like Botswana, which has a considerable resources in terms of diamonds as one of the main revenue, we never heard of even a single death, in Botswana. Maybe it is governance. If the country is governed well, then people will put in place, what's the best way to exploit their resources. I mean, DRC is supposed to be one of the richest countries in the world, because you are sitting in such a strategic resources, which are essential for everything. And I think it's a haphazard way which people dished out licenses, most of it through bribes. And every day we hear about somebody being penalized or caught for trading, or yesterday there was 1.5 billion fine for a trader for the bribes he paid in 5 or 6 African countries, including yours. And this is what people call the curse of resources. And I think it is our problem, because we need to govern our country, take control of our own assets, and govern it properly. And then the benefit of our assets come to our people. You know, I was in the room with your president and German, I don't know, sorry, from Belgium leader, and we're talking about resource, and I said, look, I mean, this country is rich because of this country. Yeah? And you go and ask aid from that country. That's not acceptable. But the fault is ours, because we got our independence. We should rule our countries in a much better way. You know, I think we moved a little bit from our main subject, but I think it's an important point to make, and we need to clean our act really and use our resources to our benefit. All these green energy key materials are in Congo. Congo and China have like a, you know, lockup on all this precious stuff. I mean, okay. Right. Madam?
Thank you so much, Mo, and the distinguished panelists. My name is Hao Sobata. I'm the 2021 Leadership Fellow. I didn't want to speak, but I think Chris and Sedi made me speak. Chris, you talked about gas as an energy transition, and then you said not only for Africa, but I stand to differ. Let's define what we want for Africa and take away the rest of the world as we go to COP27. They have followed the gas path, Chris. We are also going to follow that path to transit. It is not going to be possible for us to leapfrog. Gas is going to be our transition path. Because even if we are to use gas to power, because Africa needs energy to power industrialization, we have the AFCFTA in the pipeline, which is talking about improvement of the value chains, and we need more energy. So we have to rely on gas. And even if we use gas, studies by ECA have shown that it is only going to be 1% of gas emissions from Africa, not about the rest of the world. So let us not talk about energy equality, but let's talk about equity. Because it's equity, we have to put gas and then put renewable so that Africa can be at par with the rest of the world. Otherwise, we will not win the battle to improve the livelihoods in Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, I would read that as a statement, not a question.
Yeah, because I wanted to differ with what they were saying. They said Africa should not say we are going to replicate what the Western world has done.
I understand, but I'm saying there's no question, it's a statement.
Yeah.
Okay. Any further? Okay, you go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Nasiri Jema. I'm an alumnus scholar of the Mo Ibrahim Foundation and currently a founder of a recruit tech startup. My question is for you, Chris. You spoke to us about a triangle of key priorities that you're trying to balance. I think you had net zero, you had energy security, and you had energy access. You spoke about the cost of energy as a consideration in energy access. My question is, should that not be a lever on its own, perhaps to turn this into a square? Because if the cost of energy is not right or is not adequately balanced, many of the other things really don't matter. Security doesn't matter if people can't afford the power. Access doesn't matter if people can't afford.
Chris, you want to respond?
Yeah.
You agree with him or you disagree?
So I would say just to the lady that we didn't disagree. I was saying that you should have a base of hydrocarbons that can help, and then you can build on that. So I don't think we do differ. Anyway, sorry. Your suggestion about basically it being a square rather than a triangle is quite possible. In a way, it doesn't matter. I think the most important thing is that, and we were talking about a little bit about this beforehand, which is that one of the difficult things, and particularly it's happening even more at the moment, is that the cost of energy is rising very quickly around the world, and that is causing issues about affordability and access for people, and so governments are looked upon in order to help. In fact, we just did a global pulse survey at the council. And 85% of people, and this was the same in Africa, said it's governments who need to solve this problem right now. And one of the ways they do that is through subsidies. So they subsidize the energy in order to make it cheaper. And we can understand that because then it allows a wider proportion of the population to access energy, and as a consequence, basically, it's more equitable. The challenge is basically then how do you take away those subsidies over time? Because people come used to them, they become part of the kind of makeup of the economy and the way that people make decisions. And removing those subsidies becomes even more difficult once they're in place. So whether it should be a square or a triangle, I'm not sure. We could talk about that, of course. But the issue is really intertwined there between basically affordable and access and subsidies. And I think the figure is, and I may be corrected by this by Mr. Malpass, who spoke first, but I think it's $6 trillion a year that are spent on subsidies on energy worldwide. Now, just think if we could spend $6 trillion on a transition to move to much cleaner sources of energy, rather than supporting oil and gas at the present time in order to make economies function. And that's, in a way, one of the questions that I think should be being answered at COP, which is actually how do we transition away from these subsidies, but also get the benefit in order to reinvest it into the transition, rather than basically just then kind of distributing it in other ways. So I think you raise a very good question. I couldn't say I know exactly what the answer is, but I think it should be one of the things at COP. My understanding, I was talking to the UN last week, is that the focus of COP in Sharm el-Sheikh will be on how to. So not a long list of basically different compacts and things that people are going to sign up to, but how are we going to make the transition? What's the best way of making this transition? And what are the mechanisms that we can understand? And that's one of the things we're trying to do at the council is, once we understand them, that the council is a not-for-profit. So we're quite happy to try and share them and promote them, because in the common good about basically making this transition, it is the number one issue that we need to work out of the world. So that's a bit of a long answer, but whether it's a square or a triangle, we need to take into consideration your point and try and release those subsidies that can go into funding the transition, because that's the most important thing for mankind and for Africa.
Yeah, you want to say something? Yeah. Please go ahead.
Yeah, just looking at, as we discuss about issues to do with, for me, I believe that affordability is one of the key things that needs to be tackled. And it should go actually beyond subsidy, because most of the time I struggle with just understanding the fact that, for example, in Kenya, how a private sector company from a developed country can come to Kenya and say, you know what, for us to actually, and remember they are targeting the bottom of the pyramid. These are people who cannot even afford $1 in a day. And you tell them, you know what, for us to give these people who are actually suffering, you have to give us a subsidy. I just don't get it. Has any Kenyan or somebody from Africa actually come to the UK and say, you know what, for me to provide coffee, you need to give me a subsidy? Why is it the other way around with subsidies, and that electricity is very expensive? These people cannot afford even food. And I think it's just having that humanity. It's about the humanity. And I think for me, I feel like our governments have failed us because we don't have an agenda when it comes to access to energy. And because of that, That is where subsidy, tax rebates are coming in. And maybe he can even talk about it. It's so difficult for him to do business in Africa because somebody else can come, the path has been cleared. And then for him, and even my fellow Kenyans, it's so difficult just to get the administrative things. So for me, unless we tackle the issue with affordability, the net zero is just, we don't understand what is net zero in the village where we don't have electricity. We don't understand what energy security is. We want energy that is affordable, that people can actually take at that community level. We cannot talk about mini grids where people are paying almost $1.5 just for a kilowatt hour. Yet this is somebody who cannot afford all that. So unless we tackle the affordability, and I think it's more of a government issue, and it goes beyond policies because Kenya has the most amazing policies when it comes to energy. Talking of skills, we have graduates coming in, day out, to actually engineers. We have electrical engineers, we have mechanical engineers, and even other engineers who came to the UK and they did not come back home. So it's not about institutions, we have the institutions, but I think we really need to go beyond just those superficial kind of things, say it's not, the environment is not enabling. Enabling for who? It should be enabling for that woman in the village to actually access electricity. That's the only enabling environment we need to actually ensure that everybody gets electricity. So it goes beyond this, all these other things that we're talking about. Yeah.
Thank you. Very interesting intervention. Thank you very much. I have a question really for both Mamadou and for Sidi. Sidi, you are not in the room, but you don't think you're going to escape our questions. So please don't go to sleep. Right. Really, when we're talking about funding for gas projects in Africa, I hear some people arguing about stranded assets. Yes, I'll go and invest so much, and then in a few years, people move away from gas because it's transition. And then what I go do with my investment, which is trapped in the ground here. Is that a serious argument, or is that just a pessimistic view about the viability of investment in gas in Africa? We have on one side somebody who's seeking funding to get it done, and the other side somebody who probably get involved in funding. Can I hear the different views here, please?
Sure, I can.
Okay, Sid, you go first.
Okay, so I do believe this is one of the main features of gas, because if you invest in a gas field, you have no choice but to sell the gas. So you cannot do anything. It's irreversible investment. So this makes investment in gas a little bit scary for investors, because they can do nothing but selling gas. If there is no buyer for gas, they will lose their investment. So this is why I remember in one case, the World Bank through MIGA provided guarantee for the investors to enable them to invest. Otherwise, they will not be able to invest. As you know, investors are always looking not only for return on investment, but also for security of their investment. So this is the main issue with gas, which is not the case for others. For instance, if you have a cement plant, you can take it from a country to another country. So if you are investing in any other type of production, you have a solar plant, you can take it from a country to another. But gas, you can only sell gas, and you have to invest a huge amount, especially for offshore fields. And most of the African reserves of gas are offshore. So to invest in the offshore, you have to put a huge amount of money for the infrastructure and also for the protection of the field and the floating installations. So that's a huge amount of investment, and to be sure that you will have a return on investment, you should have a guarantee that your gas will be sold. So this is a little bit particular about gas.
But how much that, in your view, is going to open the investment in gas? I mean, will your bank be willing to offer credit or loans or investment equity in gas projects? Have you done that at all?
No, we have not been involved. We have been involved in solar energy, wind energy, but even in fossil energy, but not yet in gas. But we are currently in a process of assessing a project, gas-related project, and one of the risks which has been highlighted by the team is the risk of we need to have a guarantee for the purchase of the gas, a PPP agreement which would be guaranteed by an international institution or government. Otherwise, it will be very difficult for the investor to be able to repay the loan.
I'm sure, Sidi, if we give you the phone number of the German Chancellor, he will offer that guarantee for you. You, from the other side here, you say you mentioned $500 million.
No, 5 billion for the phase one, and the phase,
5 billion.
Yeah, and in the full phase, able to reach 10 million ton per annum is 15.
Take us step by step.
Yeah.
This 5 billion has already been committed.
Yes.
Has already been invested.
Yes.
Where from?
We had it from the market. So, like he said, for gas investment, gas is not like the oil. Oil is a spot market, international. You can invest and took out your oil, and the first day you sell it into the market. And for gas, you need first to secure the market. You first need to do the marketing of your gas before go raising the money. So it is a geopolitical and market-driven issue where it is the trend of the demand, where you have some windows to try to compete with the other countries.
So you sold your gas first, or at least before you tapped it.
Yes.
You sold it to the state in Senegal, or you sold it to your neighbor, you sold it to the Germans, to whom you sold it?
Okay, what I raised in my first intervention was the problem of Africa with its gas is we don't have the market because we don't have the infrastructure.
Yes.
We need first to create an integrated infrastructure, and as she mentioned it, the African trade agreement is like a first step, where I think it will be very important to set up a fund where they can de-risk the investment in the infrastructure, because if you don't have the market, you cannot invest for the African. But it's like a chicken and egg. We can try to leverage on this new demand of European to help unlock our gas potential. For example, Senegal and Mauritania started. We will both sell our gas together.
But my first question to you, I hope that's not state secret. I mean, you guys are open, transparent, I suppose. Not really?
Yes, we're
I'm just asking who gave you the 5 billion?
Oh yeah, no, we raise it through the market. It's not a secret. We raise it through the market. It's a capital market funding. So we go to the market.
So you offer bonds, you sold shares, what did you do? Because Africans are listening to you. People think you guys have been smart in developing that sector.
Yeah.
So they want to learn from you. So explain to us, what have you done?
Okay, we took a loan from BP for the gas. We took a loan, and now we will restructure that loan. For example, if Germany
But did you give BP a license to exploit that gas?
Yes.
Okay. They have to pay royalty for that?
Yes, of course. And when you see the structure of the benefit sharing in the contract, which is a profit sharing contract, the government of Senegal will have 65% of the global revenue, and BP will have the rest. So
you are getting 65%
of the revenue.
The revenue, not the profit, the revenue.
No, it is 65% of the profits.
Profits, yes. We cannot be the revenue because those guys will go bankrupt. Yeah.
No, it's yes. So,
but that's a good deal.
Yes, it's a very good deal. And what we did in Senegal, we put all the contracts online. You go in the EITI website, you will find the contracts, and we did all the.
You are a member of EITI now, are you?
Yeah, we are the number one in Africa. Senegal is ranked number one in terms of transparency for its publication on for its resources management, and number 4 in the world. So there is a strong
number 4 in the world.
Yeah, number 4.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. Yeah.
Yes, it's the case. You can go in the website, you'll see it. So what I wanted to address, the big challenge is how to create value chain, because the issue is not just to address the electricity, but we need also to address our path to industrialization. Let me take an example. For example, you see our neighbor, Guinea, Conakry, they produce now 80 million of ton of bauxite. Bauxite is the raw materials that you can transform to aluminium. So if you take the price of 1 ton of bauxite in the port of Conakry, is traded $30. So what's $30? No, $30 each ton. So they export it either to China or to the AUE, where the price of energy is very low, or in China where they use coal. So, for example, if they refine it to aluminum, is the first phase, they sell it to the international market $400. So, and when they refine it to have the aluminum, it is sold more than $30,000 per ton. So that gives you the response why we are at that level of poverty, because we don't capture the value.
Absolutely.
For example, we need to strengthen regional cooperation. Senegal has huge amount of gas, 900 billions of cubic meters. We can supply to the European market as much as we want. But if we had that integrated, meanings like we can be very competitive, we can sell Europe aluminium, because structurally the European market is desperately need for demand of
yeah, well, I understand. That's a good moment, of course, to be a producer with the prices going up.
Yeah.
But what about the other infrastructure? You need these terminals for liquid gas, which seems to be complicated. Something even Germany doesn't have enough. Will that be a problem? You have to build this terminal yourselves, and you find
well, now it is part of the investment. You have the FPSO, which is the boat that will do the gas treatment, that we sell it. I mean, it is fabricated from China because we don't have the, technology and the manpower. So it is part of the investment. And you have the FLNG that to liquefy it from gas to be able to
your target maybe European markets essentially?
Yes. Now.
What about your neighbors? Are you going to put some pipes to give those guys some power too, or what?
Yes, it's in the plant. But there you need huge investment in pipeline, in gas. But the thing is how you will find a model. So I think CD know that issue is an economic model, because the market is so scattered. And the thing is, for example, I take the case of Senegal because I know it very well. If you want to put a pipeline to supply all the power plant, you can face an issue to have it economical. So because they are scattered. So what we're thinking is making a cluster near to the shore where you can reduce the cost of the gas delivery at the power plant. So the main issue is that sometimes the zone of production are scattered. So you need to have them as a cluster.
Hubs.
And also, we need again to increase the domestic demand, because the domestic demand will decrease the cost of the gas. The more demand you have, the less the cost is. And if you take the case of Senegal, 16 millions of people, now our installed capacity is 1 gigawatt, meaning 1,000 megawatt, and you need 100 million standard cubic feet per day to address that demand. For example, if you just want to transform 8 million of tons of bauxite to have 2 million of tons of aluminium, you need 615 million standard cubic feet per day. The little 2 million of tons of aluminium is 5 times the demand for electricity of Senegal. So we need to address that industrialization issue to be able to better give access to electricity. You cannot have first, okay, we're going to solve the issue of the energy access, but we need to solve it at the same time. And one of the main advantages we have in Africa is our gas is low carbon intensity. For the example of Senegal, when you take the nearest place of exportation from US for the gas to Europe, Senegal and Mauritania gas is 40 times less carbon intensive. It is a strong argument when you have, for example, the foreign minister of Germany who came from the Green Party.
I heard they visited you recently, yeah. Okay.
It's a strong argument. So, and our gas is also 25 times less carbon intensity than the gas from Qatar. So we have a lot of argument to address the European market, but also create an integrated domestic market which is African. It's key.
Thank you, Mamadou. I think that was very informative to many of us don't understand the mechanics of how these things work. So that's a good education for us. We're running out of time, unfortunately, but I want to offer you, anybody want to make a statement or a summary or you have an idea want to put across, I'll give you 1 minute to do it. If anybody want to make a statement before we close this session. Go ahead.
Just one I thought was a fantastic example there about what you can do. I mean, energy transition really boils down to 2 things, which is molecules, which is gas, and electrons, which is electricity. And partly when we're doing this, we need to make a choice about, you know, how do we kind of basically capture the CO2 if we're using molecules, and how do we get electrons to as many people as possible. And I think that is as simple as it is. And you can make massive changes quickly. I mean, this room is powered by electricity, okay, in the UK. Okay? 10 years ago, right, 5% of our electricity came from wind power, okay? Today, 50%, in 10 years, 50% of UK electricity comes from wind power. So 50% of this lights and energy comes from wind power, which is completely clean. So you can make some huge changes in a very, very short period of time that still keeps the trilemma there, which gets us towards net zero. And so I think there's really kind of positive when we hear some things like Senegal, I think there's some really kind of positive things that can happen in Africa.
That's very encouraging, very encouraging. Any other statement? CD, you want to conclude? Any?
Yeah. Thank you very much. I do believe that to move from potential to real production of electricity and to solve the issue of access and affordability in Africa, it is very important that youth play their role in sensitizing the population about the possibility for them to reap the benefit of the energetic transition. And I have been impressed in some countries to see that women who are analphabet were able to work on assembling solar energy panels and learning how to make a panel works with the lamps in a very simple manner. So the potential is huge, but we need to move from talking about the potential to the real production and the access and affordability for all Africans.
Thank you. But 1 minute, please, because we're out of time.
I just want to say that the issue of the energy is not a fatality. There is no benediction or curse. There's only a good governance or bad governance. There's only a good governance or a bad governance, and and the youth must take that narrative themselves to put it and to put a lot of pressure to the policymakers. So
that's the whole objective of our foundation, actually.
Okay.
Is just to promote good governance.
Excellent.
Because that's what we need. Please join me to thank our wonderful panelists. Thank you very much. And we'll see you tomorrow at 2 o'clock for our final session in our road to COP27. And we'll be hosting the Egyptian organizers of the event also to see what they plan to do. Thank you very much, and I'll make sure to pass all these messages to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much.